OK, the Indigenous voice. Haven't the Nationals shaken up this debate? Clearly, David Littleproud, the Nationals leader, is wanting to make his mark, wanting to be noticed. It's strange behaviour in many ways because, remember, Littleproud turned up at Labor's so-called Jobs Summit a couple of months ago, which was kind of weird and a waste of time, and he's still signed on to the net zero crusade when you would think that might be the first policy difference you'd stake out to improve the country and make the Nationals more prominent. But instead, he's gone down the culture wars path and opposed the voice. And as I put to him last night, his reasoning didn't make much sense because the Nationals have been calling for more details, and instead of waiting for those details, like Peter Dutton is, before making a decision, they've announced their opposition to the voice regardless. What was the point of asking for more detail? Anyway, we'll talk to Littleproud again on this issue, but he also said the voice wouldn't work in practice. But how can he say that it won't work in practice if he hasn't seen the details? And it won't work better than what? We're failing at closing the gap now, so we should just keep doing what we've been doing? Littleproud said we need Indigenous community voices heard in the regions and in remote areas. He's right on that, but that's exactly what the voice has been proposed to do. And he said there hasn't been consultation, but there has been a huge consultation process conducted under the government he was a member of last year. Dozens of locations in regional and remote Australia, thousands of people involved. I repeat, that was under the coalition government. And I know because I was at some of those locations in regional New South Wales. I was part of that consultation process. I think there are stronger arguments to be used against the voice. If you want to oppose it, there are stronger arguments than what Littleproud has put up, such as the worry it will add another layer of bureaucracy, as raised by Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price. That would be a problem. But I think it's hardly a reason not to proceed because everything any government does in any area risks more bureaucracy. The Indigenous Affairs Minister spoke about the voice in Parliament today.
This isn't about dividing people. It's about uniting Australians, giving First Nations people a say in the matters that affect us, not being told what's best by bureaucrats.
Look, there are a lot of furphies being thrown around in this debate and they shouldn't stand. It's wrong and deceptive to call this an Aboriginal parliament or say it will govern people. The idea is to have a representative advisory body. That's all. Something the coalition had actually promised to legislate, remember, when they were in office last year. It's also wrong to say that this is about race or race-based division. It's about the original inhabitants. It's got nothing to do with racial characteristics or issues. It's about the original inhabitants being heard on issues that affect them. If you think that's somehow racist, then you best lobby for the abolition of the Departments of Indigenous Affairs in every state and in the federal government, and the Ministries for Indigenous Affairs, and the many other organisations focused on Indigenous people. It's not about dividing the country, it's about improving the country, reconciling us all, and trying to end Indigenous disadvantage.
The Australian people will decide this referendum, not politicians. And I have faith in the Australian people. We want to take Australia forward for everyone. We'll work with anyone who wants to take this journey forward to a better future.
The debate has become pretty ugly over the past 24 hours. Senator Nampijinpa-Price said this about the Indigenous Affairs Minister yesterday.
Minister Burney might be able to take a private jet out into a remote community dripping with Gucci and tell people in the dirt what's good for them, but they are in the dark, and they have been in the dark.
But it's political fashion that's really being tested here, and the Senator came in for some very strong and personal criticism from Noel Pearson this morning. He's an architect of the voice, and he's accused Senator Nampijinpa-Price of running lines from the right-of-centre think tanks, the Institute of Public Affairs and the Centre for Independent Studies.
They're the string pullers. They're the ones who have lined up behind Jacinta. This has been a campaign in the making over the last 3 years, and their strategy was to find a black fella to punch down on other black fellas.
Pearson didn't hold back, did he? I asked Jacinta onto this program to respond, but she's already lined up. You can catch her later on with Andrew. Look, there's plenty of politics involved in all of this from all angles, but most participants surely want the same thing: a more cohesive nation and less disadvantage for Indigenous Australians. We can't prescribe or ascribe the wrong motives to anyone in this debate, surely. But politics hates a vacuum. And Anthony Albanese and his Minister Linda Burney have left a vacuum in this space. They should have been leading this debate with details and substantive arguments, not just slogans. The Nationals have fired up the debate not with substance but with resistance. So what are the issues? Well, given that most Australians and most politicians and commentators, even those who oppose the current proposal, given most of them support Indigenous recognition in the Constitution, and also support Indigenous people having a say on government policies directed at them, well then obviously the only issue here, the only point dividing people, the sticking point, is whether this should be enshrined in the Constitution. That's a real issue. It's always worthy of close consideration because we don't want changes to the Constitution that will deliver unintended consequences. So a couple of points on that. People should either outline how the proposed clauses would create strife, because we already have proposed wording, and that's the most important detail in all of this debate. So if people think those clauses are wrong, they should either propose alternative wording or state their opposition to the referendum based on that assessment. That's, of course, fair enough. But there's been very little on that. And it's probably not surprising because constitutional lawyers and former Chief Justices of the High Court, no less, have allayed their concerns with their considered views, saying it's not such a problem. And the latest to add his assessment is Kenneth Hayne, a former High Court judge. In a speech, he said, "It has been suggested that if the proposed constitutional amendment on the voice is made, litigation will derail the intended effect of the amendment or may derail the ordinary workings of Parliament and the executive government. I do not share these fears. I think they are baseless." The former High Court judge explained his reasoning in detail and finished with, "So what exactly is this fear that is raised when it is said, the courts will get into this space? I think the more you look, the less there is to fear. The fear is baseless. The fear is baseless." That's not a politician, that's a learned judge. But hey, let the debate continue. They're the sorts of opinions we need to consider and debate. Now, already one senior federal nat, Andrew Gee, says he still supports the voice, and the Western Australian Nationals are dissenting on this issue too. In the end, this will be a chance for Peter Dutton and the Liberals to see the arguments fleshed out and assess the lay of the land before they make their call on this issue.